Hey guys, Trey here. Apologies for not doing forecast discussions for last week's little stretch of severe weather days. Had a couple great days around May 21st, 22nd, 23rd. I was out chasing all those days, so didn't really have time to do it out on the road. It was quite the grind, so I was pretty tired those days. But I'm at home now, so wanted to do a discussion on today's enhanced risk down in central Texas with a tornado threat, 5% tornado threat, and a 30 hatched wind and hail threat down for cities like Waco, Killeen, Temple, down toward Austin, Lampasas in that area as well, almost down to the San Antonio area there in the slight risk, and the northern and western suburbs of the Houston metro in the slight risk as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's start with the overall pattern, the overall big picture here. So this is our 500 millibar pattern. According to SPC mesoanalysis, we have a big closed low here, centered right over the Oklahoma-Arkansas region, with a belt of 45 to 50 knot flow around the western and southwestern periphery of this closed low. This is quite unusual for this time of year. We don't see northwest flow events a lot in this time of year. Definitely unusual to see for May 27th. You'd expect to see our big bowling ball trough off the on the west coast with nice flow, southwesterly flow, impinging on the plains, but not the case this year. It's been quite kind of a slow May for the southern plains, except for maybe a couple of days. But yeah, this is definitely odd. This northwest flow. But it is there. Doesn't mean that just because it doesn't happen regularly doesn't mean that it can't happen and that we won't get severe storms from it. Still, this belt of flow is definitely good enough for us to see severe storms and increase the shear for us. We go to 700 millibars. We see that reflection as we go down of that closed low with about 20 knot southwesterly or northwesterly flow around the backside of that. There's a little bit of a shortwave out here in the Texas Panhandle into eastern New Mexico. That should pivot around today, and that should help us fire storms later on in the afternoon. You can see the kind of the progression of that. It doesn't quite remain as amplified, but it's definitely there. You see a little bit of a kink in the flow. This is 6 hours from now, so 21Z. Little reflection right in there, right in central Texas. That should provide a little bit of fuel to get storms going right about 21Z. Let's go to our 850 map. We can start to zoom in now, and you see just very weak low-level winds here. Not much of a low-level jet at all. Do we see it increase throughout the day? Not really, honestly. 10 to 15 knots of 850 millibar flow is just kind of anemic for this time of year. You expect to see 30, 40, 50 knots southerly or southeasterly low-level jet this time of year in the plains. Just not the case this year in this late May. So that could be an issue as far as tornado potential later on today. Let's take a look at the overall surface pattern. We'll zoom in a little bit more with our actual surface map here in a sec, but just overall weak winds, 5 to 10 knots at most here over central Texas, and really not forecast to strengthen throughout the day. If we go back to our 500 millibar map, of course we've got the mountains here. What we'd like to see for lee cyclogenesis, so a low pressure area forming on the lee side of the Rockies, is we'd like to see more westerly flow, some westerly or southwesterly flow at 500 millibars. That allows that flow to go over the Rockies and sink. As it sinks, it's a lot of math involved, but you get an increase in vorticity or spin here on the lee of the Rockies, and then you get surface cyclogenesis, a surface low to develop. That's just not the case today. We pretty much have northerly flow, maybe northwesterly flow over the Rockies right now. That's not going to lead to significant cyclogenesis. So I would expect this surface pattern to remain pretty much the same throughout the day. We have maybe some semblance of a very weak low here over West Texas. It's very elongated, very weak. We do see some reflection of that start to get enhanced here later on this afternoon, according to the RAP model here over southwest Texas, the Big Bend area, which should allow winds to maybe strengthen some, but I wouldn't expect anything to strengthen significantly from what it is now. Um, let's go ahead and zoom into our actual surface map here, our station plots. So again, we see very weak winds here, almost westerly or west-southwesterly winds here across much of central Texas. Only about 5 to 10 knots. That's just really not going to get it done if you're looking at tornado potential. Um, as far as moisture goes, we do see a plume of pretty moist air from East Texas all the way through the just south of the Waco area, Killeen, Temple in the mid to upper 60s here, over toward the Junction, Texas area, the I-10 corridor down to Del Rio. Mid 60s to 70s dew points down here. So moisture, at least at the surface, is decent out here. But as you go farther west, it starts to decline a little bit. We see Abilene right now 76 over 55. Just south of there, 77 over 60. So mid 50s to maybe low 60s out here in our likely initiation zone. And we do see southwesterly winds here at the surface. That's probably going to remain as the day progresses. It might strengthen a little bit, but I wouldn't expect much from what it is now. But what southwesterly winds do is they tend to filter in air from the southwest, of course. And that air to the southwest is only marginally moist. So, number one, we're not going to get strong advection due to just a lack of an overall well-defined surface pattern. If we got winds out of the southeast somehow, stronger winds, maybe 20, 25 knots, then we could pull this greater moisture up from the south and southeast. But just not going to be the case today. Surface winds should be probably out of the southwest at best, south-southwest at best. It's just not going to pull much more appreciable moisture into the target area today beyond what's already there. And if we look at moisture quality, look at our spreads, first of all. Our temperature dew point spreads are already 21 in Abilene, 17, 16 here just south east of there. They're already getting pretty high, and we'll take a look in a second. Our satellite imagery. Actually, let's go ahead and take a look at that now. We see pretty much clear skies over here. We do have some showers here near the Dallas-Fort Worth area across North Texas. Some very, very patchy clouds here, but for the most part, it's mostly clear. And what that does is we're going to get lots of solar heating, lots of surface heating from the sun, and we're going to get mixing. So if we had lots of moisture aloft, we could get that to mix down to the surface. Is that the case, though? Let's look at our observed soundings from this morning. Let's go ahead and start with Dallas-Fort Worth. And we don't see very high quality moisture here. We don't see a deep moist layer at all. Strong capping inversion here at the surface at Dallas at 12Z, 7 a.m. Central Time. Not a whole lot of great moisture above that to mix down. Let's go to Corpus Christi, where we probably would expect to see a deep moist layer this time of year, but that's not the case. We were probably wiped out a little bit from that MCS that went through a couple days ago. But you can just see not very high quality moisture here to mix downward from above here across central and southern Texas. So we can look at Del Rio as well, kind of the same thing. Wouldn't expect a lot of mixing of good moisture down, and just not deep moisture here across this region today. So I would expect this with solar heating and temperature dew point spreads as high as they are now, that probably going to be seeing pretty high LCL heights, pretty high cloud bases today. So that is one hampering factor to the tornado threat today. But that doesn't mean we can't get large hail. If we look at our, let's take a look at our Dallas sounding. Let's go ahead and do Corpus Christi. We see our elevated mixed layer aloft here. Very steep lapse rate plume here from about 850 millibars up to about 600 millibars. Very steep lapse rates aloft here. Already a lot of instability here. We see mixed layer cape of over 1,000 joules per kilogram already at 12Z. and it's almost 11 o'clock as we're recording this. So that is only going to grow throughout the day. I would expect instability to grow to probably over 2,000, 2 to 3,000, probably a good guess, a good safe guess. So we're going to have a very unstable atmosphere, very steep lapse rates aloft. So I would expect large hail today, and with the amount of shear we're going to see from this nice 500 millibar trough, bringing pretty strong winds aloft, with winds that kind of with veering winds with height, strengthening and veering winds with height. We're going to see lots of shear around, lots of bulk shear around today, and you can already see 50 to 55 knots here, 45, 50, 55 knots here in central Texas. That should remain throughout the day and even get stronger throughout the day. So supercells are likely today. And with that very strong instability, steep lapse rates, large hail is a distinct possibility. I guess one more thing we could take a look at is storm mode. Are we going to get discrete storms? Because obviously that plays a big role in the severe hail threat, whether or not we're going to see a hail or a wind threat. And we saw the SPC was highlighting both of these. So let's take a look. And let's take a look at our surface pattern here. So we can see maybe some sort of a boundary in here, or some sort of a wind shift line. We see winds pretty calm, but maybe southeasterly here, easterly to the north of that boundary, and they veer to westerly and southwesterly to the south of it. Kind of becomes more well defined as we go on through the day. You see that kind of kink in the pressure contours where those storms form. So winds to the north of that boundary, which would kind of be right in this region. Winds to the north out of the southeast, southwesterly winds out in here. So our boundaries are going to be oriented, we could say roughly west to east, maybe a little bit more northwest to southeast, but for simplicity's sake, we'll say it's kind of west to east. Let's look at our bulk shear vectors. So our bulk shear vectors are very much northwesterly, almost northwesterly. So if we have a boundary that's oriented like this, and we have our shear vectors like that, storms are going to be able to move off that boundary and remain pretty much discrete, I would think. They're pretty much orthogonal between the orientation of the boundary and the bulk shear vectors. We have a nice amount of orthogonality, if you will, if that's even a word, between those two vectors. So I think discrete storms are a good possibility, at least initially here with storms today. So I do think a significant hail threat is a distinct possibility. Later on this afternoon, though, with pretty strong forcing, I would expect that we would get a decent number of storms to form, and then we could see storms start to congeal. One thing about the storm mode is going to be splitting storms. So if we look at our models now, let's go into our models. We'll go here on Pivotal. Let's take a look at the HER V4. Take a look at the 12Z run. We're already zoomed into the South Plains. So let's take a look here, see what the HER does. So the HER, firestorms, right, just southeast of Abilene right there, about 21Z, about 4 p.m. Central. Has them pretty much semi-discrete throughout the afternoon, and then they kind of congeal throughout the day. They get messy as we go into the evening hours. But let's take a sounding out ahead of these, and you'll notice that the photographs are just not that conducive for tornadoes today. Not a lot of curvature in the lowest levels. We'd really need winds to be weak and backed for us to get curvature in this photograph, but they're really not. Pretty much straight photos today. What that's going to do, straight photographs means splitting storms. So splitting storms are going to be a reality. We're going to get a lot of storm mergers, most likely. And what that's going to do is that could make things messy, more messier than what just looking at how orthogonal the shear vector is to the initiating boundary. So that could complicate things as far as storm mode goes. And you see right away, we only have a couple storms here, but as we get a right split and a left split, they're kind of going to congeal and things get a little bit messier here throughout the afternoon. That'll be something to watch. And that could also help enhance the tornado threat locally. I still not buying the tornado threat, the 5% that the SPC has. I'd probably have a 2% to kind of cover, kind of CYA, if you will. I could see a brief tornado or two based on just storm scale interactions. If we get a favorable storm merger to occur, I could see maybe a brief tornado to happen if it's a favorable storm interaction. But otherwise, I don't think the tornado threat is that great today. I think mostly a large hail and damaging wind threat. So we can take a look at some other models here. Let's take a look at the regular HRRR. Why don't we? We'll go ahead and look at the 14Z run, see if that's coming in. Yeah, we'll look at the most recent run. This is the 14Z run. It has those showers over North Texas, as we saw. And then it's pretty much the same thing. Right about 21Z, we get storms to form. This is even farther west. That's almost Abilene. So that's much farther west than what we were thinking yesterday. Also have a separate cluster of storms out here. Now these are in better moisture. So let's take a sounding from out here in front of those guys. Yeah, a little bit better moisture out here, you see. Better temperature dew point spreads, 86 over 69. Problem is, our photographs still are not that great. See 0 to 1 SRH of 58 meters squared per second squared. Effective SRH at only 128. So just not really conducive for tornadoes. I definitely could see a large hail threat out of these. Let's see. You can see even these kind of get a little bit messy, and that's probably due to storm scale interactions, storm mergers, and whatnot. Again, the spread's not as great out here, 91 over 60. That is very high. Photographs still very straight, very long. So very long still. So that would favor splitting storms with lots of shear, which would mean large hail. But again, 0 to 1. Surface to 1 kilometer SRH at only 54 meters squared per second squared. Effective SRH a little bit better out here, so supercells definitely a likelihood out here. Tornadic supercells probably not today. Probably just a large hail threat. Then as we get in the evening, they start to congeal a little bit into kind of a cluster mode, into a complex. We'll take a sounding just for fun out here, and the photographs just don't improve that much throughout the afternoon and evening hours. We can look at the NAM 3 kilometer, just for kicks. I hate this model, but does fire discrete storms, keeps them semi-discrete here throughout the evening hours. Actually, probably a better way to do this. Let's look at the HREF from the SPC. This is kind of an ensemble of all the cams. So this is our updraft helicity. So we can see in here our members are the HRRR, the NAM NES, the 3 kilometer NAM that we just looked at, the WRF ARW, the NSSL WRF models. Those are all taken into account here. And we get probabilities that we're going to have updraft helicity greater than 75 meters squared per second squared, which could indicate supercells within a certain contour. So we see a pretty good signal out here in central Texas that most, if not all, of the cams are firing supercells out here with significant updraft helicity. And so in this contour, greater than 70% chance that we're going to see updraft helicity of greater than 75 meters squared per second squared. So pretty good signal here in central Texas that the cams are agreeing on a supercell mode here throughout the afternoon. And that continues into the early evening hours. We can see, let's see, what else can we do? Let's see our SRH. This is our mean SRH across 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative helicity across all of the cams. So as we go through the afternoon, we see that SRH just is sapped completely. Starts to come back here around 22Z, but that coincides with when our storms form. So I think this is convection enhanced. So probably a faulty reading here. That's just from the storms themselves. So not actually what the actual environment is doing. But you can see right before storms form, just not much 0 to 1 SRH, and it doesn't really improve on the environmental scale throughout the afternoon. So all in all, I think discrete storms are a definite likelihood, at least for the first few hours of storm formation. I would expect storms to form maybe around the Abilene area or just southeast of there by about 3 to 4 p.m. This afternoon. Would imagine they would stay pretty discrete for a while, producing large hail, likely significant hail greater than 2 inches in diameter. Could see some baseball hail reports today, especially with the amount of shear we have in the atmosphere to promote a supercell mode. But tornado threat probably very low today. I would probably, I just don't see the 5% personally. Would probably have a 2%. You can always get storms to interact and storm boundaries to interact, and you can get a brief tornado out of these. So I think 2% definitely warranted, but just not seeing the 5% this morning, and definitely do see a damaging wind threat as we go later on into this evening as storms congeal. But I think the main threat today is going to be very large hail, especially in the first few hours of supercell formation. So that's about all I have today. If you're out chasing today, good luck, stay safe, and we will see you under the next mezzo. Thanks for watching.